In the annals of true crime, there are few killers as insidious and chilling as Joseph Michael Swango, a man who betrayed one of society's most sacred trusts. Known as the Angel of Death, Swango used his position as a doctor not to heal, but to kill. His journey from promising medical student to one of the most prolific serial killers in American history is a story of unchecked ambition, systemic failure, and a chilling lack of humanity. Joseph Michael Swango was born on October 21, 1954, in Tacoma, Washington, to Muriel and John Virgil Swango. His father was a career Army officer and Vietnam War veteran, whose strict discipline and subsequent alcoholism left an indelible mark on young Joseph. Swango excelled academically and musically, but his father's descent into mental illness and eventual death seemed to deepen a growing detachment within him. After graduating as valedictorian from Quincy Notre Dame High School in Quincy, Illinois, Swango initially pursued a military career, enrolling at Millikan University and later transferring to Quincy College. Despite a promising start, he abandoned his military aspirations and shifted his focus to medicine, enrolling at Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. This decision marked the beginning of a career path that would turn deadly. During his time at Southern Illinois University, red flags about Swango's behavior began to surface. He displayed a morbid fascination with death and often expressed a lack of empathy for patients. His peers noticed that Swango was more interested in reading about gruesome deaths and accidents than in learning about medical care. His odd behavior extended to his clinical work, where several patients under his care experienced sudden, unexplained complications or even death. Despite these alarming patterns, Swango graduated in 1983, though not without difficulty. Faculty members were deeply concerned about his lack of clinical competence, but the absence of direct evidence against him allowed him to move forward. This marked the first of many systemic failures that would enable Swango to continue his deadly career. After medical school, Swango interned at Ohio State University Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. Here, the pattern of mysterious patient deaths escalated. Nurses noticed that healthy patients often deteriorated suddenly after Swango visited their rooms. In one case, a patient recovering from a routine procedure inexplicably died within hours of Swango administering medication. Staff members grew suspicious, but their concerns were dismissed by hospital administrators eager to avoid scandal. When an internal investigation found no concrete evidence against Swango, he was allowed to quietly resign. This failure to act decisively would cost more lives. Swango returned to his hometown of Quincy, Illinois, where he took a job as an emergency medical technician (EMT). The move proved deadly for his colleagues. Swango began poisoning his coworkers with antimony and arsenic, slipping the substances into their drinks and food. Several EMTs fell ill, experiencing severe nausea, vomiting, and fatigue. Though they survived, the experience left them shaken. In 1985, Swango was finally caught tampering with his coworkers' drinks. He was convicted of aggravated battery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, even incarceration failed to deter him. Swango spent his time in prison obsessively reading about poisons and refining his methods. By the time of his release in 1987, he was more dangerous than ever. Despite his criminal record, Swango managed to secure medical positions upon his release, thanks to a combination of falsified records and weak background checks. He worked briefly in South Dakota before moving to New York, where he was employed at the VA Medical Center in Northport, Long Island. Here, his killing spree resumed with devastating consequences. Patients under Swango's care at the VA hospital began dying under mysterious circumstances. Despite growing suspicion, the hospital failed to take immediate action, instead allowing Swango to resign quietly. This pattern of avoidance and inaction by medical institutions would prove to be a recurring theme in Swango's career. In 1994, Swango fled the United States to avoid further scrutiny, taking a position at a hospital in Zimbabwe. His time in Africa proved equally lethal. Patients under his care at Mnene Lutheran Mission Hospital began dying at an alarming rate. Local doctors and nurses grew suspicious, but Swango managed to evade capture by fleeing the country before authorities could build a case against him. Swango's crimes in Zimbabwe and his abrupt departure left a trail of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Many of his victims' families were left to wonder why a man tasked with saving lives had instead chosen to destroy them. Back in the United States, federal authorities began piecing together Swango's trail of death. The FBI launched an investigation, uncovering evidence of his poisoning activities and a disturbing pattern of unexplained deaths at hospitals where he had worked. As the net closed around him, Swango attempted to secure a position in Saudi Arabia, a move that would have placed him beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. In 1997, Swango was arrested at Chicago O'Hare International Airport while attempting to board a flight to Saudi Arabia. Authorities charged him with fraud for lying on his medical license applications, but their ultimate goal was to hold him accountable for his murders. Faced with mounting evidence, Swango eventually confessed to causing the deaths of several patients, though the true extent of his crimes remains unknown. In 2000, he was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, prosecutors described him as a narcissistic and remorseless killer who had exploited the trust placed in doctors to satisfy his twisted impulses. Swango's case sent shockwaves through the medical community, prompting hospitals and licensing boards to implement stricter vetting processes. However, for the families of his victims, these reforms came too late. Today, Joseph Michael Swango sits in a maximum security federal prison, serving his life sentence. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a veneer of professionalism and competence. Swango's ability to exploit systemic weaknesses and evade detection for so long raises uncomfortable questions about accountability and oversight in the medical profession. Swango's crimes have been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and academic studies, each attempting to understand the mind of a man who turned a noble profession into a vehicle for murder. Yet, for all the analysis, one haunting truth remains: the full extent of Swango's killing spree may never be known. The families of Swango's victims continue to grapple with the aftermath of his crimes. Their pain is compounded by the knowledge that many of the deaths could have been prevented had earlier suspicions been taken seriously. For survivors and advocates, Swango's case underscores the importance of vigilance and accountability in preventing such atrocities from happening again. As the medical profession continues to heal from the wounds inflicted by Swango's betrayal, his story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the deadly consequences of systemic failure and unchecked evil. The angel of death may be behind bars, but the scars he left behind remain a chilling testament to his reign of terror. While Swango's crimes were primarily focused on his patients and co-workers, the ripple effects of his actions extended far beyond the immediate victims. Families of those he poisoned or killed struggled to comprehend how such a betrayal could occur within the sanctity of hospitals. Many spent years seeking answers, haunted by the thought that a trusted doctor had deliberately caused the deaths of their loved ones. In the small towns where Swango practiced, his name became synonymous with fear and mistrust. Communities once confident in their medical institutions found themselves questioning the integrity of the very system designed to protect them. These fractures in trust left an indelible mark, lingering long after Swango's arrest and conviction. Swango's ability to evade detection for so long was not solely a result of his cunning, but also of a systemic failure at nearly every level. Hospitals, fearing reputational damage, often dismissed or downplayed allegations against him. Background checks were either incomplete or non-existent, allowing Swango to move from institution to institution unimpeded. One of the most glaring examples of this failure occurred at the VA Medical Center in Long Island, where Swango was allowed to resign despite mounting suspicions about his involvement in patient deaths. This lack of accountability enabled him to continue his spree, both in the United States and abroad. Experts have pointed to Swango's case as a turning point in medical oversight. His actions prompted widespread reforms in hospital hiring practices, including more rigorous vetting of credentials, closer monitoring of patient outcomes, and mandatory reporting of suspicious behavior. These changes, though significant, came too late for Swango's many victims. Understanding what drove Swango to commit such heinous acts remains a topic of intense speculation and study. Some psychologists have suggested that Swango suffered from a form of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychological disorder in which an individual deliberately harms others to gain attention or sympathy. Others believe his actions were motivated by a narcissistic need for power and control, as well as a profound lack of empathy. Swango's fascination with death and suffering was evident from an early age. He reportedly kept scrapbooks filled with newspaper clippings about car accidents and other tragedies, an obsession that carried into his adult life. This morbid curiosity, combined with his medical training, created a lethal combination that allowed him to kill with precision and evade suspicion. Swango's crimes extended beyond the borders of the United States, leaving a trail of devastation in countries like Zimbabwe. In Africa, where resources were limited and medical personnel were in high demand, Swango found ample opportunity to exploit the system. The deaths he caused there highlighted the global nature of his crimes and underscored the vulnerabilities of healthcare systems worldwide. In Zimbabwe, the loss of patients under Swango's care was particularly devastating, as many of the victims were members of tight-knit rural communities. The impact of his actions was felt not only by the families of those who died, but also by the healthcare workers who unknowingly facilitated his crimes. For many, the realization that a trusted colleague was a murderer was a betrayal too great to bear. Now serving his life sentence at the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, Swango remains a subject of fascination and revulsion. Reports from prison suggest that he continues to exhibit little remorse for his actions, maintaining the same cold and calculating demeanor that characterized his medical career. For criminologists, Swango's case offers a rare glimpse into the mind of a medical serial killer. Unlike many killers who act impulsively, Swango's crimes were methodical, calculated, and deeply embedded in his professional identity. His ability to weaponize his medical knowledge against his victims makes him a uniquely chilling figure in the history of crime. As the years pass, the focus on Swango's crimes has gradually shifted from the killer himself to the lives he cut short. Memorials, books, and documentaries have sought to honor the memory of his victims, ensuring that their stories are not overshadowed by the infamy of their killer. For the families left behind, the pain of loss is compounded by the knowledge that their loved ones died not of natural causes but as the result of deliberate and calculated acts. Their resilience in the face of such tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of Swango's actions. Dr. Joseph Michael Swango's story is one of betrayal, systemic failure, and unimaginable cruelty. His ability to exploit the vulnerabilities of the healthcare system allowed him to commit his crimes with impunity, leaving a trail of devastation that spanned continents. While Swango's reign of terror has ended, his case continues to resonate as a cautionary tale. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of accountability, vigilance, and the need to prioritize the safety of patients above all else. The scars he left behind on his victims, their families, and the medical profession are a chilling testament to the darkness that can hide behind a trusted facade.